Sonia and I'm the director of Odale's Choice. It was produced by the Arabara Center for the Creative Imagination in 2008, and it also represents Barbados at Carifesta that same year. The play was written by Keoma when he was in Ghana in Salt Pond in 1958. He was an education officer, and he wrote the play for the community he lived in. He said he wrote it very quickly because the play is an adaptation of Antigone, which is one of the oldest surviving scripts in Western civilization. It was written by Sophocles and won, I think, the first prize in 441 before the current era, BCE, in their Dionysus Festival, which was a theater festival held in Athens. I chose this play precisely because it came from that Western route in Greece and was then used by Keoma, a Barbadian, who in a sense had traveled the triangle, traveled the Maafa, leaving Barbados, going to Cambridge and studying in Cambridge, and then going to Ghana and living in Ghana, which for him changed his perspective as a poet. And so for him to take this classical piece and make it into an African piece was very interesting, because not only did I see African traits in the piece, but I also saw African Caribbean elements in the production. It was this coming together of the European roots and the African roots in this play that made it very, very interesting for me. I saw it as a Creolized space. And so at the Arabara Center, which was a new program that I was teaching in, the acting technique and the directing, a lot of the practical courses, I found that this creolization process needed to be explored, because for me it embodies much of what is Caribbean, the process of creolization and eventually indigenization. Movement 1.
Bonnie? Yes?
As you would have noticed in the first two clips, the play started on the main campus of the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill, with a procession of young women singing and dancing and traveling through the streets and the traffic light and over to the Arabara Center for the Creative Imagination, down the Toussaint Louverture driveway, and to the doors of the Walcott Warner Theatre. Outside of the theatre there was a shrine which was dedicated to the Amerindian story that is held in the memory of this earth. It's a turtle shrine. And this was a very important choice. It was very much connected to the perspective that I took when I analyzed the play. The writer, Keoma, says that the play starts with a festival in the village, and Odale is possessed by the drum. And so her sister Licho cannot get her attention because she's possessed by this drum. That was the primary reason for me having the festival, because I wanted to create that moment of possession. But the other reason was equally important, If you look at the story of Odale's choice, Odale is a heroine. She stood up for her brother when no one else would. Everyone in the village knew it was wrong for a dead body to be left out on the hillside, for the birds to peck out its eye and the worms to crawl into it and just be exposed with no rituals whatsoever for the dead and the family of the dead. This is something universal. The dead must be buried. But Crayon had made an edit that he was not to be buried because he was killed in battle fighting against Crayon, fighting the very city from which he came from. And so because of that betrayal, he was sentenced to this horror of being left on the hillside. And Odale, going against Crayon's words, went and performed a symbolic burial ritual for her brother. Now, she represented to me a feminine element, which is very powerful. And I thought that this was very appropriate play for this time period, because we're going through a time period. I mean, over the last 50 years, we've been going through a time period where women have been standing up for their rights, for equity. So that Odale for me represented a needed, powerful feminine element. And so the procession was imagined or reimagined as young women coming from initiation in the forest. Because how else do you get women to be powerful if they're not taught by elder women who teach them their power? And so you'll notice in the procession that there were women in mask leading the procession. The women, there was the protector who had a Collins, and she had a mask made with nails, all the masks were created by Petra Toying. You had the fertility goddess in a woman. You had the clearer of the way with a broom made from coconut fronds, who was sweeping and clearing the way spiritually. And so all of the African sensibility and ideas about masks and characters were used to create this African Caribbean kind of characters. And this was very important because Odale was doing in the masquerade what she would then do on the stage. She was taking over. She was taking over the streets, and taking over the streets is an act of resistance in and of itself. Stopping the traffic, stopping the movement is an act of resistance. And so her initiation was preparing her for the play. Okay? And the other thing that I was doing was breaking down the theater walls. Because when people of color in the Caribbean, when African descents did not have access to the theater space except to hold the seat for their master, they performed everywhere. They performed under the tree, they performed by the bridge in town, by the ships coming in, they performed in the streets, they walked from one parish to the next performing and singing, etc. And so there's a sense in which our theater, the theater, African Caribbean theater, does not just happen in the theater space. And so I was breaking down the walls of the theater.
Movement 2.
noticed in the scene that you just saw that with the two women, that was Odale and Lichio, they're twins actually, you would have seen that the ground looked very brown and dirty. And this was very interesting for me because when Odale and the women came into the theater, they danced in the theater, and all of the mud, because their bodies were smeared with mud that was on their body, dripped onto the floor. And the floor became like the ground outside. And this was an amazing thing, phenomenal for me. The curtains are pulled, and it's almost as if they're outside still. If I had my way, we wouldn't be in the theater yet. We would be outside performing this scene, and we would come into the theater for Crayon's Palace. Another choice I want you to consider is the use of sound. So you noted that we started with a big bang, lots of drums playing, lots of voices singing, but the element of sound will continue to be important throughout the play. You notice in the scene with Lichio and Odale that when the soldiers entered, you heard them running through the audience with their big heavy boots. And then at the end of the scene when they said, he's been captured, if they capture they will, and the sound of what we call the morning sound started. This was a soundtrack that I asked Stefan Walcott, who is now Dr. Stefan Walcott, to prepare for the production. It was original music. And the whole idea was to create the idea of mourning women, which is part of the West African tradition, that they're actually women who go to funerals just to mourn. Okay? And so the morning sound was very important for building that emotional space. Sound and sounding has the power to elicit a visceral response. And so that's one of the reasons that as a director is very, very important in my work. Another thing I want to point to, if you'll notice that the way the play is set up, there is a group of women together who are the village women, a group of men together who are the soldiers, and then there are the two young women and Crayon. And each of these represent a different segment of society, and in a sense, even though it is an African community, the different positions of power that these groups hold within the world of this play. So the women's power is there as a community of women, not as an individual woman, but as a community of women. And the men are community of soldiers. But Crayon, he is the most powerful at the beginning of this play. And I would ask the question, is he the most powerful at the end?
Movement 3.
And now listen, all of you, while I speak. No one shall touch this body, for I pronounce it unclean. No one shall bury this carcass, for I pronounce it unclean. This man was a traitor, an evil eye who would have destroyed his own family and his own home. And for what? His own petty, selfish ideas. Away! Leave him there. Do not touch him. Let the wolves come. Let the vultures fly in. Let the worms go to work. And let no one in this country, not even I, who should know, who should love him, cast him a last prayer, a last love, a last honor. Away! Guard the body. Let the traitor lie. I, Creon, have spoken. Who disturbs this place or approaches the body will die. Not be good at all.
It don't make no proper sense to me at all.
At all.
Nobody from this place is sweep their house the way them say this man is want them sweep. One say he leave up baking there for beast to bite, bird to peckle the eyeball and for worm to chop it. This thing not be good at all. At all. So now where he blood going to walk, eh? Where he goes going to sit, eh? Which place he go look for soup? He not even get the chance to rest smart. And which place he could go if he can't come back here? Oh man, it be bad palaver too much. And the boy, he be fine taking no be so. I hear if I good, it could soldier too much.
But how we can think to do what to do? One say to bite same hand that feed up. Cha, for true big man say he is a traitor.
One of the most important things about directing is once you've got your audience's attention, you don't want to lose it. You want to keep them focused. I call it black space. You want no black space. Space where nothing is happening. So even in the darkness, they must be sound. Okay, and so in this next scene, I love this scene because it's another lesson also in being in the now and being interactive with what is actually around you. So you have the script, you have the words, you have the plan, but now you're in a theater and the men are bringing in the dead body and they have to walk down these steps. They could have just walked in with the dead body, but no, we had sound. We had the horn to let you know somebody important was coming. We had the drums to keep the rhythm of the soldiers. And then we had the soldiers' voices. And interestingly enough, Inside Outside actually came about because one of our soldiers' feet was like size 13 and one was like size 8. And they had to be able to move together down these tiny steps of the theater. And so in a practical way, they needed to let each other know, step now, step now. And this is what they do in the army as well. They call it out, they sing a song, you know? And by calling and responding, then you're able to work together. And so here we have the African principle of call and response, as well as the practical things coming together to make choices about how the play was done that worked. And this is important for directors, to always take note of what is actually around you and what is practical and what works, as well as being able to bring in these bigger ideas about making choices. Okay, now I made the choice to have them carry guns because I wanted that sense of power and modern power with the guns. I think of modernity coming out of the enslavement of the African people. That's the beginning of modernity, because we are the ones who kind of came out and did all the work to make the world, the rest of the world, kind of progress. And so guns is part of that. So they have guns, and Crayon represents the modern man. He speaks proper English. The rest of them, the men don't. As soon as the scene finishes and he leaves, they breathe a sigh of relief and they go into patois. There's no be good at all. Okay? And they go into the patois of what in this case, very influenced by our hearing of Nigerian movies. But for me, as long as the whole cast comes from the same village, it is okay. It must sound like your cast comes from the same place, okay? Unless, of course, they're strangers in the play. But so we have this soldiers after he leaves, and we have a beautiful performance by John Hunt, who I told him you must bring it into your body and you must dance it almost, and he did. And the soldiers, as soon as he leaves, says this no be good at all. And they disagree with him, but yet they're doing what they are told. And this is important in terms of what kind of power does this character Crayon really have? Is he really able to make people follow him because they believe in him and they believe in his ideas and his philosophy, or are they following him out of fear of death? And it seems to be the latter.
Movement 4.
Our Lord and Master, great one, wise one, you who go forth early in the morning, clearing the path, you who return the days in the night. Leader, protector, you who watch over us. Our life is in your hands. Our hearts are in your hands. Our children nestle safely in your arms. Help us! Protect us! For we are weak. Weak. Oh, weak. And inadequate vessels. And we need you. We need you to help us and save us. For we drown. Down waters, we will whisper, and drown. All the water is dark, the evil is dark. It reaches towards us, it presses upon us. Oh, Creon, mighty, mighty Creon, take your mark from this young one. Spare her! Lift her up! Lift her up! And forgive her, for she is young, so young, so innocent, tender, and young. Oh, spare her! Oh, we drown. Down.
I couldn't share with you Odale's choice and not show you a clip of the women in performance. The morning women were amazing. We talked a lot about sound and sounding of words. And in this scene that you just saw, the sounding of words was also used with the banging of the ground, and it became so much that Crayon's head started to hurt him, as we would say in Barbados. He had a hurty, and he had to listen to them. They somehow got under his skin. And that in and of itself was a kind of power that they wield together as women. First they told him how magnificent he was and how much they respect him as a leader. And because they respect him as a leader, he needs to reconsider what he's about to do by taking his niece's life. His niece, who was like a daughter to him, he was going to kill. And they actually convinced him. And he said, okay, I'll spare her life, but she'll be in exile. And she said to him, if that is the case, and you're going to spare my life, does that mean that I can go and bury my brother? And you know, that is the insult, because he's just saved her life and she's willing to lay it down again in order to bury her brother. And this is a very powerful moment in the play, both for the women to convince Crayon, and also for Odale to say, I would rather die than live in a way that is against the ways of the gods, not man. Man does not control me. It is the gods that I look to for direction. And this is the most powerful moment in the play. And we come to the end of the play. And what's interesting for me about the women is so much of their language made me think of the Caribbean. All of the metaphors. They will drown. Down, down, they will drown. And there's the image of the blackness of the sea over them. And I can't help but remember the middle passage and that aesthetic of the Mahafa, the idea that so many of us are under the water, that we're never buried, and kind of eliciting that kind of image in the Caribbean touches you. Okay? The other thing I want you to make note of is Crayon's Palace. Crayon's Palace has huge columns, like it's back in Greece or Rome. And nobody said to me, what are those columns doing there? Everybody said to me, this is so African. And I found that was interesting because in the Creole process, we get so used to the presence of the European and the African at the same time that sometimes we think that something is European and it's African. And sometimes we think something is African and it's the root of it is a European cultural practice or way of doing things. And so to have these columns in this African man's house, for me, was a representation of the kind of power that Crayon holds. Crayon holds power over, not powered, shared. The women hold powers, shared power as women. And Odale, as an initiate into the world of womanhood, she holds the power of voice, of being able to stand alone and speak up for what she thinks is right. And this is very important, the exploration of power in this play. And so the play was very successful. I think I have to thank the actors even now. They were really committed to the process. We did this was not a class assignment. We did this outside of the classroom on our own over a period of time. I also have to acknowledge Asieba Irobi from Dr. Asieba Irobi from Imo State, who was an Igbo man who came to the campus just when I needed him and gave us all the lovely songs that you heard us singing. He has since passed away. May he rest in peace and rise with the ancestors. And we'll just end it off because this song is so important. The song he taught us, I asked him for a song we could use. And he said, you know, in the early 1920s, I believe, there was a rebellion of Igbo women from Imo State. They stole or kidnapped all of the chiefs because the chiefs were in court with the British, and they wanted to tax widows, and it was African tradition that widows are taken care of, they're not taxed. And so these African women went down the street singing these songs, some of them naked and covered with mud, some of them carrying tree branches or covered with red, as is the tradition, singing this song which says, who are we? You cannot touch us. We are the children of the gazelles. We are the children of the tigers. You cannot touch us. And that's the song they sang as they walked across the campus. Oh momo, iyo, oh momo, iyo, odo bodo, iyo, aye bago, iyo, ago baro here, ibada uwayo, iyo. And so that was Odale's choice.
This video was made possible by a Catapult Caribbean Artist Online Award.
Tonight, man, ya kwamba tutapata. Tonight, man, ya kwamba tutapata. Yuhuru. Amani, amani, amani.